The river had always been the easiest lie to believe. On satellite composites, it was a confident stroke of blue, thick as a vein, cutting through green so dense it looked painted. In old expedition footage, it was muscle and noise, brown water shouldering trees aside, the jungle breathing wet into the lens. In the papers, carefully worded, politely optimistic, it was navigable during seasonal lows. But this year, the river was only pretending. It slid through its bed like something ashamed of its own thinness, exposing ribs of mud and rock that should have been drowned. Long stretches had narrowed to braided channels, each one hesitant and slow, splitting and recombining around sandbars that glittered dry in the sun. The outboard motor on their skiff had been coughing all morning. Now it was dead silent, its prop half out of water, the whole boat grounded like a beached animal. Dr. Anna Soria stepped over the gunwale and sank ankle-deep in warm, cracked mud. The smell rising off it was wrong, dusty, mineral, with only a faint undertone of rot. A riverbed, in her mind, was supposed to be alive with decay. This one smelled like something that had been left out too long and forgotten by the weather. Behind her, Ben Muir swore softly and heaved their supply crate toward the bank. The crate scraped, the sound too loud in the drought-dulled air. When they'd started upriver 3 days ago, the forest had been loud enough to drown out human noise, the constant scream and chatter of insects, the distant whoop of monkeys, the soft percussion of unseen birds. Now the jungle kept its voice low. It wasn't silent, it was restrained. Anna adjusted the strap of her pack and looked up at the canopy. Sunlight fell through it in thin blades, sharp and bright, not softened by the usual swampy haze. Even the light felt brittle.
"Careful," Gabe called from the lead skiff ahead of them. He'd already jumped out and was knee-deep in mud, guiding the second boat around an exposed root mass. He had the wiry endurance of someone who'd spent too many years doing logistics in places where maps lied for a living. "If we stay stuck here, we lose another hour. That's heat we don't get back."
Anna didn't answer. She knew what he meant. She could feel the heat already crawling up through her boots, through the mud, into the bones of her feet like it was looking for purchase. She looked downriver, where their wake had long since smoothed into nothing, and then upriver, where the channel bent out of sight. The air above the water shimmered faintly with heat. In another year, in another season, there would have been a faint mist at dawn and dusk, the river and the jungle breathing together. Now there was nothing but dry warmth and a faint tang of smoke, distant, diluted, more an idea than a smell. El Niño, the briefings had said. Severe dry season, low river, canopy humidity down, fire risk elevated. Their permits had come with an extra page this year. No open flame outside designated pits, no careless fuel handling, no generator run without a cleared perimeter. Fire in the rainforest was normally a slow, reluctant thing. This year, everything felt like it had been waiting for a spark. Anna felt that waiting in her skin. Dr. Soria, it was Priya, stepping out of the skiff behind her with a careful, practiced motion. Priya wore her hair braided tight and tucked under a bandana, her face shielded from the sun by a hat that had seen too many field seasons. She had the kind of calm that came from studying living systems. You learned early that panic didn't change chemistry. Anna turned. "Yeah." Priya glanced at the exposed mud banks, the low waterline. "If it's this low here..." "It'll be worse up the tributary," Anna said. Ben grunted and shoved another crate onto firmer ground. "Should have guessed the river would turn on us," he muttered. "Everything turns on you out here." "Rivers don't turn," Gabe said without looking back. "They just do what they do. People are the ones who pretend it's personal." Anna watched him for a moment. Gabe had been hired because he knew how to keep a team alive without making it feel like a military operation. He'd done work for research groups, for NGOs, for corporate surveys with more money than sense. He could read people and terrain the way Anna read iconography. He also knew when to press. "We'll drag the boat," he called. 20 minutes, then we're moving." Anna nodded to herself and started helping Ben with the crates. Her hands sank into damp rope, then into the crate edges, and she felt the heat already beginning to pull sweat out of her skin. sweat that dried faster than it should have. She kept her mind where it always went when her body was forced into the present, to the thing that had brought her here, the Starman. Not the name, exactly. Names changed, languages dissolved and reformed like rivers, but the figure had been consistent across 3 different artifact clusters, separated by hundreds of kilometers and, according to dating, nearly 1,000 years. A human-shaped figure descending from something depicted as a flower of fire. A head surrounded by lines, halo, rays, a stylized helmet, depending on how you wanted to interpret it. Outstretched hands. And beneath, always, a mound, sometimes drawn as a stepped mountain, sometimes as a geometric hill, sometimes as a stylized doorway. The first shard had been catalogued as a ceremonial myth panel, a sky being, a god, a common motif. Then Anna had found the second one, years later, in a dusty storage drawer in a regional museum. A fragment of painted plaster, not pottery, the pigment still stubbornly bright. The same figure, the same descent, the same mound. Only this time the mound was drawn with lines that made her think of architecture. And then the third, a collection of carvings recorded by a survey team decades ago and dismissed as post-contact folk art because it didn't fit the timeline they wanted. Anna had stared at the photos for hours until her eyes hurt. The carved figure's halo wasn't a halo at all. It was a ring of repeated shapes, like the segmented petals of a metal mechanism. She had written the first paper carefully. She had titled it something safe, Recurring Motif of Celestial Descent in Late Pre-Contact Amazonian Iconography. Her colleagues had smiled, indulgent, the way they did when you brought them something interesting but not yet threatening to their understanding. Then she had written the second paper less safely, Geometric Continuities in the Starman Motif, Possible Correlation with Unmapped Structural Remains. That one had gotten attention. Not the kind of attention you could eat, but the kind that arrived as emails and calls and a sudden invitation to present at conferences where people asked pointed questions and pretended they weren't excited. And then the LiDAR data had arrived. A strip of canopy-penetrating imaging from a government mapping project, shared quietly with universities under a data use agreement. The strip contained anomalies, straight lines where straight lines shouldn't exist, terracing shadows under green. One of those shadows matched Anna's sketches so closely, her throat had tightened. A geometric hill in a place no known settlement had been recorded. A pyramid, if you were willing to say the word. A mound if you weren't. They had called it Site K17 in the mapping file. The coordinates were almost insultingly plain. Anna had stared at them and thought of the Starman's outstretched hands, the way he was always depicted as if he was trying to touch the earth gently. Now she was touching the earth, mud and heat and rope, and it didn't feel gentle at all. "Up!" Gabe called again. "Now!" They dragged the skiffs like wounded animals, pushing and pulling through mud, over exposed roots, around rocks that scraped the hulls. Each scrape made Anna flinch, not because she was afraid of the boats breaking. Gabe had built redundancy into everything, but because the sounds felt like they carried farther than they should. The jungle watched them. She could feel it. When the channel deepened again, they climbed back in, motors sputtered to life, and they continued upriver. As the day wore on, the river narrowed into a tributary, and then into something that was barely a river at all. They abandoned the boats at a sandbar and loaded everything onto their backs and onto 2 pack frames. The rest of the gear went onto a small tracked sled Ben had insisted on bringing. It whined as it crawled over roots, its battery meter ticking down in the heat. Anna would have preferred the quiet of human muscle, but she understood the reality. They were carrying a week's worth of food and water purification and mapping equipment. If they wanted to do real documentation, they needed power. They moved in single file under the canopy, machetes biting through vines that hung limp and dry instead of wet and springy. Leaves crunched underfoot. Leaves weren't supposed to crunch here. At midday they stopped in a shallow depression where the ground was cooler, the air marginally less harsh. Gabe made them drink water even when nobody felt thirsty. Thirst was a liar too. They sat with their backs to tree trunks that felt warmer than they should have, listening to their own breathing.
"Smoke," Ben said suddenly, quiet.
Anna lifted her head.
"What?"
Ben tilted his chin toward the sky where light filtered down. The sunbeams carried faint specks, ash or dust. They drifted slowly, almost lazily. "That's smoke."
Priya followed his gaze. "Could be dust. In this humidity?" Ben asked.
Gabe's expression tightened.
"There's always burns in the dry season," he said. "Clearing fires, illegal stuff."
"Does it spread?"
Anna asked before she could stop herself.
Gabe looked at her, eyes hard for a moment.
"It can," he said. "This year it can."
Anna swallowed. The ash specks drifted.
Somewhere far away a fire existed. Out here, everything far away was closer than you wanted. "Keep going," Gabe said.
They did.
By late afternoon, the terrain began to change. Not dramatically, this was rainforest. It didn't give you cliffs and vistas easily, but subtly. The ground rose. The undergrowth thinned in ways that didn't match the canopy above. The trees grew in slightly more uniform spacing, as if something beneath the soil had guided their roots.
Anna felt it before she saw it. A wrongness in the way her feet struck the earth. Less spongy, more solid. Then, between two buttress roots, she saw stone. Not a boulder, not an outcrop. A cut block, half swallowed by soil, its edge too straight to be natural. Moss clung to it in patches, but the moss was sparse, as if it couldn't get purchase.
Anna stopped.
The people behind her bumped gently, a chain reaction. Gabe appeared at her shoulder, breathing hard.
"Is that—" he started.
Anna didn't answer. She crouched and brushed dirt away with her fingers. The stone face emerged, smooth, flat, with a faint incised line pattern. A corner, a step. Her pulse kicked. Ben came up behind them, still holding a strap of the sled. He leaned in.
"No way!"
Priya's voice was almost reverent.
"It's worked."
Anna stood slowly and looked up.
The jungle ahead opened just enough for her to see it.
At first glance, it was just a hill, a rise in the forest floor, covered in vines and trees like everything else. But the slope wasn't right. The angle held too steadily. The vegetation didn't drape naturally, it clung, and through the clinging green she could see stone faces, stepped and planar, a geometry that fought the jungle's desire to soften everything. A pyramid, buried in plain sight beneath 1,000 years of growth. Nobody spoke for a long moment. The jungle held its breath with them. Then the sponsor rep, Marco Vale, clean boots ruined days ago, sunglasses smudged with sweat, let out a low whistle.
"Huh," he said. "So you weren't chasing ghosts."
Anna didn't look at him. She kept her eyes on the stone.
"It's real," she said, and heard the tremor in her own voice.
Gabe moved first, because that was what he did when people froze. He walked forward, scanning the ground for stability, for snakes, for anything that could kill you quietly while you stared at miracles.
"Camp here,"
he decided, gesturing to a relatively clear patch of ground at the pyramid's base. On this side, wind's better, less dead underbrush.
"Wind's better," Ben echoed, and Anna could hear what he meant. Wind meant fire carried.
They set camp with practiced efficiency. Tarps went up, hammocks slung, a small fenced area cleared for the generator, with a ring of scraped earth around it. Gabe was meticulous about that ring, clearing leaves until bare soil showed.
"No sparks," he told them. "I don't care if you're tired. No cigarettes, no open flames, no—"
"No heroics,"
Ben finished for him, tone sarcastic but obedient.
Priya set up her field lab under a tarp, small instruments arranged like offerings. Anna unpacked her own kit, cameras, scale bars, portable LiDAR scanner, notebooks sealed in waterproof covers that felt almost ironic in this dryness. She kept looking up at the pyramid as she worked, unable to stop herself. The structure was larger than the LiDAR had suggested. Not massive on the scale of famous pyramids, nothing like that, but substantial enough that it changed the feel of the forest around it. It rose in stepped terraces, each terrace half claimed by roots and vines. Trees grew from the stone like parasitic crowns. In places, stone faces were exposed, and the blocks were fitted with a precision that made Anna's hands itch to touch. But something else scratched at her perception, too. The pyramid's immediate perimeter was less alive. Not dead, not barren, just different. The undergrowth didn't choke the stone the way it did everything else. The moss was patchy. Insects still moved, but not in the frantic density she expected. And there were fewer sounds. Anna told herself it was simply the microclimate of stone. The way it changed airflow, the way it held heat. It was normal to have quieter pockets. Still. Gabe came to her tarp as the light began to tilt toward evening. "We go in at first light," he said. Anna nodded. "We should do an exterior pass tonight," she said. "At least map the terraces. Photogrammetry, baseline." Gabe's eyes narrowed, not with disagreement, but calculation. "You can do some," he said, "not all. It gets dark fast. And if anyone falls off those terraces in this heat—" He didn't finish. He didn't need to. Anna sighed, but nodded again. "A quick pass. I'll take the drone tech." Kellen, young, wiry, always half grinning like he couldn't believe he'd talked his way onto this expedition, was already charging batteries and checking his quadcopter. He looked up when Anna approached. "You ready to make history?" he asked. Anna didn't smile. "I'm ready to document it," she said, and then softened. "Yes. Let's do it." They climbed the first terrace carefully, stepping on stone where it was exposed, avoiding root nets that could turn into traps. Anna ran her gloved hand along a block edge and felt the faint grooves of tool marks. Human tool marks. A culture had done this. Had organized labor in a rainforest and built stone into a shape the jungle hadn't been able to erase completely. Kellen launched the drone. It rose with a soft buzz and climbed above the canopy line, its camera sending live feed to the handheld screen. The pyramid's step geometry became clearer from above. A square base, 4 terraces, a flattened top covered in vegetation. On the screen, the surrounding forest looked endless. No roads, no clearings. Just green punctuated by the brown scar of a low river in the distance. "Nothing else around," Kellen said. "Which is the point?" Anna murmured. They circled the terraces until the light began to fade and the air cooled just a fraction. Somewhere, far away, thunder grumbled without rain. The sky, glimpsed through canopy gaps, was a hard, pale blue. When they returned to camp, the generator hummed softly. Gabe stood by it, watching as if he could will it not to throw sparks. Marco sat on a folding stool and drank water with the exaggerated carefulness of someone trying to look unafraid. "So," he said when Anna approached, "you going to find the little alien man in there?" Anna stopped. "What?" Marco smiled. "Starman," he said, as if that explained his joke. "Come on, you've got to admit it sounds like the kind of story people tell when something falls out of the sky." Anna felt heat rise in her cheeks, not from embarrassment, but from irritation. "It's an iconographic motif," she said. "It could be metaphor." "Could be," Marco agreed smoothly. "Or it could be something else. Which is why I paid for this trip." Anna's jaw tightened. "You funded equipment," she corrected. "You didn't pay for the find." Marco's smile didn't change. "We'll see," he said. Gabe stepped between them without overt hostility, just presence. "Eat," he told Anna. "Then sleep. We start early." Anna forced herself to eat, though her stomach felt too tight for food. The camp meal was dry rations warmed on a small sealed stove, used inside a cleared pit to minimize risk. The smell of warm protein paste mixed with dust and sweat. After dinner, Anna sat under her tarp with her notebook and looked at the drone images again. The pyramid was real. The terraces were real. The geometry matched the mound in the Starman motif almost too perfectly. She should have felt triumphant. Instead, she felt watched. Not by eyes, by time. This structure had been here for centuries, maybe longer, and the jungle had wrapped it in green and silence and dryness. And now she had come with blades and batteries and names. She thought of the Starman image in the shards she'd studied. He was always depicted descending, always arriving, never leaving. Anna closed the notebook. She slept in fitful patches, sweat drying on her skin, the air too warm for comfort. She woke once to the smell of smoke, stronger than before, drifting in from some far place. It didn't feel closer, but it felt more real.
She lay still in her hammock and listened.
The jungle's night sounds were there, soft insect chatter, distant animal movement, but muted, as if the forest didn't want to waste energy on noise. In the early morning, before the sun rose fully, Gabe woke them. The air was cool enough to pretend at relief. They suited up in light gear, gloves, helmets with headlamps, rope harnesses. Not because they expected a collapse, but because they expected the kind of accidents ruins loved to gift the careless. Anna led, because this was her site, her obsession, her myth turned to stone. Kellen followed with cameras. Priya carried sampling kits and a small environmental sensor wand, more out of habit than expectation. Ben carried tools. Gabe carried rope and a machete. Marco insisted on coming too, and Gabe didn't argue, though his jaw tightened.
"Stay behind," Gabe told him. "Do not touch anything."
Marco lifted his hands. "I'm just here to observe," he said. Anna didn't trust his definition of observe. They approached the pyramid's most exposed face, where stone blocks formed a stepped incline partially freed from roots. The entrance wasn't obvious. It never was. Temples hid their mouths, not because people were clever, but because weather and time demanded it. Anna followed the stone seam lines, looking for unnatural breaks. Kellen's handheld scanner helped, showing subtle density changes beneath the surface. "There," Ben said after 20 minutes, pointing to a section where stone blocks had shifted slightly inward, forming a shadowed recess. Anna crouched and brushed away dry leaf litter. The recess deepened into a narrow gap, just wide enough for a person to squeeze through. The air that came out was cooler than the morning. Not wet cool. Stone cool.
"Entrance,"
Anna whispered. Kellen's eyes shone. Finally. They widened the gap carefully, removing stones that had settled in the recess. Ben used a pry bar with practiced gentleness. The stone came away with a sound like a sigh. Anna shone her headlamp into the opening. Darkness swallowed the beam after a few meters. "Rope," Gabe said. Ben anchored a line to an exposed root mass outside. It wasn't ideal, roots shifted, but Gabe tested it and then doubled it with a second anchor into a stone seam. He trusted nothing singular. Anna slid through first. The passage was tight, stones scraping her shoulders. Dust fell into her hair. The air inside smelled dry. Not stale, just dry, like a room that hadn't breathed in a long time. She dropped down into a narrow corridor and stood. Her headlamp beam lit stone walls that had been cut and fitted, their surfaces worn smooth by time and humidity, but not collapsed. The corridor sloped gently downward. Behind her, one by one, the others squeezed in. Their headlamps made the corridor brighten in harsh cones. "Look at this," Kellen breathed. Anna turned her beam toward the wall and saw it. The first mural. It wasn't immediately obvious in the dark. The pigment was faded, the stones stained by centuries. But as the light moved, shapes emerged. A human figure outlined in mineral red and soot black, suspended above smaller figures. The air around the descending figure was painted in a pattern of radiating lines, like petals or rays. The Starman. Anna's throat tightened. "This is it," she whispered. The corridor widened into a small chamber, and the mural expanded across the wall. The Starman descending, a crowd gathered beneath, hands raised. Behind them, the mound, a stepped structure, began to take shape in the painted story. Anna's hands shook slightly as she pulled out her camera. She forced them still. "Scale bar," she said. Kellen snapped into motion, placing a scale and color card at the base of the mural. Anna photographed, shot after shot, each one capturing details her eyes didn't trust themselves to hold. Priya stood beside her, breathing slow. "It's exactly the same composition as the pottery shard," she murmured. Anna nodded without looking away. "They remembered," she said. "Or they copied, or it happened," Marco said quietly behind them. Anna turned sharply. "We don't jump to conclusions," she snapped. Marco's expression was unreadable in the headlamp light. "No," he agreed. "We just follow doors." Gabe cleared his throat. "We keep moving," he said. "We document as we go. Anna, lead. Kellen, record. Ben, watch footing.
The corridor continued past the mural chamber and sloped downward. The stonework changed subtly as they moved, blocks smaller, joints tighter, the feel of the space narrowing. In places the walls were soot-stained, as if torches had burned here long ago.
Anna's excitement kept trying to outrun caution. Each step down felt like stepping into older air, older hands, older decisions.
They reached another chamber.
This one was larger, with murals on 3 walls, pigment brighter than in the corridor. The style was cleaner, more ceremonial. The Starman appeared again, descending, the crowd rejoicing. The mound being built, the myth reiterated.
"This is the upper narrative," Anna said, voice low. "The version meant to be seen, the polished telling." She traced the edge of a painted line without touching it. "They wanted this to endure."
Kellen panned his camera slowly. "It's like a storyboard." Priya's sensor wand beeped softly. She frowned. "Humidity's low," she said. Anna blinked. "In here?" Priya nodded, looking at the readout. "Lower than I'd expect for a sealed chamber in rainforest stone. Not by a lot, but noticeable." Ben laughed softly, without humor. "Maybe the pyramids got better ventilation than our camp."
Gabe shot him a look. "Don't joke about ventilation," he said, and then seemed to realize he'd said something oddly specific. He shook it off. "Just watch your breathing. Dust."
They moved deeper. The corridor narrowed again, and then widened into a 3rd chamber. Anna stepped in and stopped.
Because the mural here was the same arrival scene, Starman descending, crowd gathered, but the figures beneath looked different.
Not celebrating. Their hands were still raised, but now they were pressed to faces, to chests, to mouths, bodies bent. Anna's skin prickled. "This is older," she whispered, though she didn't know how she knew. The pigment was less saturated, the lines more angular, as if the artist had worked faster. The stone beneath showed more wear. Kellen leaned in. "It's still the arrival," he said. "But look." The next panel, painted across the adjacent wall, showed figures lying down. Smaller figures, children, carried or dragged. The crowd was thinner. A line of animals, stylized deer, birds, monkeys, were depicted mid-run. But then, in the next segment, those animals were gone, replaced by empty space. Anna swallowed. "It continues," she said, and her voice sounded too loud in the chamber. Marco's headlamp beam swept across the wall. "That's disease," he said. "Plague story." Priya didn't answer immediately. She moved her light along the mural carefully, studying. "Could be," Priya said finally, "or it could be something else. The way the animals disappear, it's not how I've seen epidemic iconography done." Anna stared at the figures with hands to mouths. She felt a slow chill crawl down her spine that had nothing to do with stone temperature. She forced herself to do what she always did. Document. They photographed. They recorded. Anna spoke aloud descriptions into her recorder, naming pigments, brushstrokes, composition. But her mind kept snagging on the same thing. The Starman was still there in the panels. Only now, instead of standing tall among the people, he was shown at the edge, turned toward a dark shape at the base of the mural, a stylized opening, a mouth drawn as a black rectangle. And his posture, Anna could see it even through the stylization, was not triumphant. It was strained, as if he was holding something back. They moved onward, deeper into the pyramid. The air grew cooler. The corridor's slope grew steeper. And then they reached a point where the stonework changed again. The blocks became larger, rougher, less carefully finished. The ceiling lowered. The passage felt more like a throat than a hallway. Ben ran his gloved hand along the seam. "Different phase," he murmured. "Older," Anna said without certainty. Kellen's headlamp caught something embedded in the stone, just a glint, a line that didn't match mineral. Anna crouched and brushed away dust. Metal. Not a nail, not a modern intrusion. A thin strip of something fused into the masonry, dark and smooth and utterly out of place. Her breath caught. "Ben," she whispered, "look." Ben knelt beside her, eyes narrowing. He touched it lightly with a gloved fingertip, and then pulled back. "That's not."
"Is it meteorite?"
Marco asked too eagerly.
Anna stared at the strip. Meteorite iron oxidized. This didn't. This looked manufactured.
Gabe's voice was low. We log it, he said. We don't pry it.
Anna nodded, though every part of her wanted to peel the stone away until she could see the whole thing.
She forced herself up and kept moving.
The next chamber they entered was smaller, tighter, the walls less decorated. And yet the mural here, what remained of it, was the most vivid.
It began with the same arrival panel, Starman descending.
Then the sickness.
Then something Anna hadn't seen yet.
A black shape at the base of the mouth, depicted not as an animal, not as a demon, but as a mass. A thick form that flowed over the bodies of animals, over fallen people. Where it touched, the painted figures became thin outlines, as if the artist couldn't bear to draw what came after.
It wasn't symbolic. It was literal.
Anna's mouth went dry.
Priya's voice was a whisper. That looks like consumption.
Ben swallowed.
You mean like a fire?
Anna stared at the black form. It wasn't painted like flame. Flames were drawn as tongues, as jagged lines, as rising shapes. This was drawn as a weight, a low smear.
A tide.
Gabe shifted behind them. We don't go further today, he said, and his voice held more firmness than it had earlier. We've got enough to justify the site. We go back, we sleep, we plan.
Marco made an impatient sound.
We're here, he said. We go deeper. That's why we came. This is the point.
Gabe's eyes flashed.
This is the point, he agreed, and then stepped closer, lowering his voice.
And that's why you don't rush it.
Anna looked between them. Part of her wanted to push. The same part that had carried her through years of academic dismissal and grant applications and long hours staring at fragments in storage rooms. The part that whispered, "You are here. Don't waste it."
Another part of her, quieter, deeper, felt the way the air was too dry, the way the murals shifted from celebration to collapse as they went down, the way the Starman's posture changed from blessing to bracing.
She thought of the river's exposed ribs, the smoke in the air, the jungle holding its breath.
Anna nodded slowly.
We go back, she said.
Marco's face tightened.
Tomorrow, he said, as if promising himself.
They retraced their path upward, headlamps bobbing, rope line guiding them through tight corridors. The upper murals greeted them again, Starman descending in joy, crowd rejoicing, and Anna felt a strange bitterness.
Above, the myth was clean.
Below, the myth kept bleeding into something else.
When they emerged back into daylight, the heat hit Anna like a slap. The air outside smelled more strongly of smoke now, faint but undeniable.
Gabe looked up at the canopy and cursed softly.
Ben followed his gaze.
It's closer, Ben said.
Anna saw it too. A thin haze between leaves, a faint dimming of sunlight.
Gabe's jaw worked. We keep the generator perimeter cleared, he said. No cooking fires outside pit. No. We know, Ben said, and this time there was no sarcasm. They returned to camp and spent the afternoon logging what they'd found. Anna's hands moved steadily over her notes, but her mind kept drifting to the black tide painted on the deep chamber wall,
to the Starman's braced posture,
to the metal strip in the stone.
At dusk, with the sky turning a hard, pale violet, Anna sat alone at the edge of camp and looked up at the pyramid's terraces. Vines hung in still loops. Leaves didn't rustle. The jungle's usual night chorus began, slowly, reluctantly, like something testing whether it was safe to be loud. Anna imagined hands laying stone, centuries ago, building upward, smoothing a myth into something celebratory, because the truth underneath was too heavy to carry for generations. She imagined the Starman, whoever he had been, standing at the base of that dark mouth, pressing his hands against something unseen, holding it shut, and she imagined time doing what time did, eroding seals, shifting stone, blurring urgency into story, until the only thing left was a beautiful narrative about a man who fell from the sky.
Anna rubbed her palms together, trying to rid herself of the feeling that she had touched a door without meaning to.
Behind her, the generator hummed. The cleared earth ring around it lay bare, dry, ready.
The smoke haze thickened slightly as night fell. In her tent later, She listened to the muted jungle and thought of the deep murals continuing the story into sickness and death.
They had not yet reached whatever lay beneath the mouth.
But the mouth existed.
And now she knew it wasn't metaphor. Now she knew there was something down there that had needed to be sealed. Anna closed her eyes and told herself the same thing she'd told herself her whole career. Tomorrow, we document. Tomorrow, we go deeper.
And the pyramid in the darkness did what it had done for 1,000 years. It waited.
Morning came thin and hard, like someone had scraped the night off the world with a knife.
The air was cooler than it had any right to be in a rainforest, but it wasn't wet cool. It was the kind of cool that made Anna's skin tighten and her throat feel papery. When she stepped out from under her tarp, she tasted smoke in the back of her mouth, faint, distant, persistent. Somewhere beyond the canopy, something was burning and not stopping. Gabe was already up, moving through camp with the quiet authority of a man trying to stay ahead of problems he couldn't outrun. He checked the generator ring first, kicking away stray leaves that had drifted in overnight like they were insults. He made Ben redo the cleared perimeter twice, even though Ben's eye roll was visible through his sleep-stiff face.
Wind shifts, Gabe said. That's all it takes. This year especially.
Ben scraped at the soil with the heel of his boot.
You're acting like we're camping in a matchbox.
Gabe looked at him. We are, he said flatly.
Anna drank water and forced her mind onto the work. Act 1 had given them a miracle and a warning wrapped in pigment. Today was the day they turned that warning into certainty.
They ate quickly, packs lightened for the descent but still heavy with what mattered. Cameras and scale bars, environmental sensors, sample jars, gloves rated for chemical exposure, rope. Gabe insisted on respirators this time, simple half-masks with filters, because the lower corridors had been dusty and dry in a way that didn't match the world above. Priya didn't argue. Priya rarely argued about air, Marco complained, but he put the mask on.
I look ridiculous, he muttered, adjusting the straps like they were a personal offense.
You look alive, Gabe said, and that ended the discussion.
They entered the pyramid through the same narrow mouth as yesterday. The stones scraped their shoulders. Dust fell. Anna's headlamp beam caught motes floating in the air like dry pollen. That bothered her more than she wanted it to.
Stone in a rainforest should sweat. This stone held its breath. In the first mural chamber, the Starman greeted them again in clean mineral lines, descending, haloed, welcomed. The crowd beneath was painted with uplifted hands and open mouths. Anna forced herself to pause, to photograph properly, to do the job rather than chase the story. Kellen filmed slowly, his camera panning across the scene with the reverence of someone who finally understood why Anna had dragged them here. Even Marco was quiet, his headlamp beam lingering on the Starman's radiating lines.
Same composition, Priya murmured. Anna nodded. This is the one they wanted remembered.
Which means there are others they didn't, Gabe said.
He didn't mean it poetically. He meant it like a man who had seen enough human behavior to know what people hid. They moved deeper.
The slope down felt steeper today, not because it had changed, but because Anna's body had learned the shape of it and now anticipated it. She could feel the pyramid swallowing daylight behind them, replacing it with headlamp cones and cold stone. At the second chamber, the upper narrative unfurled again. Brighter pigment, cleaner lines, the myth as ceremony. Starman descends. People rejoice. The mound begins to rise. The story stopped before consequence. Anna lingered just long enough to record the pigment composition, the brushwork, the way the artists had used mineral red and carbon black, and a faint chalky white for highlights. Then she pulled her gaze away and stepped into the corridor beyond, where yesterday's unease waited. The third chamber, the one where the arrival scene repeated and then turned, hit her differently today. Yesterday it had felt like a surprise. Today it felt like an accusation. The Starman descended again. Same posture, same radiating halo pattern. But the figures beneath him were already bending, hands pressed to chests, mouths covered. The crowd looked thinner, the space between bodies wider. Anna lifted her camera, and her hands, steady all morning, trembled. She forced them still. Kellen's voice was muffled through his respirator. It's like the same story, but after. Priya moved her headlamp across the mural's lower register. "Look at the animals," she said. Anna followed her beam. In the panel beneath the crowd, stylized birds had been painted mid-flight, but they weren't soaring. Their wings were at odd angles, as if they were falling. A deer-like animal was shown with legs buckling. A line of smaller creatures, monkeys, rodents, seemed to be fleeing, but then the next panel was empty where they should have continued. The artist hadn't replaced them with symbols. They'd simply stopped drawing them. Anna felt her stomach tighten. "This isn't just human sickness," Priya said softly. Marco stepped forward, his headlamp beam cutting across the mural like a knife. "Plague takes animals too," he said. Priya's eyes flicked to him, calm and unreadable. "Some do," she agreed. "Not like this." Ben cleared his throat. "So, what are we saying? Poison? Bad water? Smoke?" Anna stared at the painted mouths and bent backs. "We're saying it's a record," she said. "Not an allegory. A record of something that happened." Gabe's voice was low. "Then we listen." They did. They followed the mural sequence to the next wall, where bodies lay depicted in rows. Not in the neat order of burial, but in the scattered collapse of people who had fallen where they stood. Some figures were drawn being carried, limp. Smaller figures clung to larger ones. And always, in the edge of the panels, the Starman remained, no longer centered, no longer radiant. He stood near a black rectangle at the base of the mural, a mouth drawn as darkness. His arms were outstretched toward it, not blessing, bracing. Anna's throat went dry. She'd seen that posture before in other contexts. Workers holding a door against pressure, hands planted, back bowed. A human shape resisting something that wanted to open. They moved beyond the chamber and down again. The corridor narrowed, the stonework shifted. Blocks grew larger, rougher. The walls felt older, less finished. The slope steepened. Ben's breath rasped louder inside his mask. "This is foundation," he said, half to himself. "Different build phase." Anna ran her fingers lightly over a seam. The joint was tighter here, the stones fitted with obsessive care in a way that suggested urgency rather than artistry. "They built this first," Anna murmured. "Then they built the pretty layers above it later." "Or they rebuilt," Gabe said, "after something." Anna didn't answer because her mind had already latched onto the deeper truth. The warnings were below, not above, because the danger was below. The earliest builders had carved their story closest to the mouth. Later builders had decorated the safer levels and let the reason fade. They reached a low chamber where the air felt colder. Priya stopped and held up her sensor wand. It beeped softly. "Humidity's lower again," she said, frowning at the display. "And temperature drop." She looked up at the stone ceiling, then at Anna. "This isn't matching outside conditions," Ben snorted. "We're underground." "Not that far," Priya replied, "and not in porous stone that's been breathing rainforest air for centuries. It should be damp. It should feel alive." Anna felt the truth of Priya's words in her own lungs. The air in this chamber didn't cling. It didn't taste of mold or earth. It tasted like dust and stone, and something faintly metallic. Kellen's headlamp beam caught the edge of a mural here, but it wasn't bright pigment. It was etched. Incised lines in stone, shallow and hurried, as if the artist had stopped caring about beauty and focused on telling the next thing before time ran out. The Starman descended again, but his halo was different here. The radiating lines were segmented into repeating shapes, like petals made of plates. Anna's pulse kicked. She'd seen something like that on the third carved fragment, the one dismissed as post-contact folk art. The halo that had looked mechanical. She crouched closer, light angling across the incisions. The segmented shapes weren't random decoration. They were consistent, evenly spaced, like something manufactured, a ring of repeated components. Her stomach turned over. "This is it," she whispered. "This is the layer that matches the fragment. This is older." Marco leaned in behind her. "So the myth kept going longer than you thought," he said. Anna ignored him. Her eyes followed the incised scene beyond the descent. The crowd below wasn't cheering. They were turning away. Some were shown holding cloth over mouths. Some were depicted dragging others.
And beneath the crowd, at the base of the mound, the artist had carved a shape that made Anna's skin prickle. A long curve, ribbed along its length, like a spine.
Not stone blocks, not steps.
A curve with repeating ribs.
It was drawn too confidently to be metaphor. Whoever carved it had seen it.
Ben's voice came out thin. "What is that?"
Anna swallowed. "It looks like structure," she said slowly. "Like a hull."
Silence fell.
Kellen's camera whirred softly, recording the moment none of them wanted to name out loud.
Priya's voice was careful. "If it's a hull," she said, "then the Starman wasn't a god."
Anna's throat tightened. "He was a survivor," she said. "A person who arrived in something." Gabe shifted, the rope line at his waist creaking faintly. "Then what did he bring?"
Nobody answered.
They didn't need to. The murals were answering them already, in stone.
They moved to the next incised panel. The ribbed curve became more prominent. The crowd thinned. The carved figures collapsed.
And then the artist did something that made Anna's breath catch. They carved the black mouth again, but this time it wasn't a rectangle. It was a curved opening with a thick border, like a door.
A hatch.
A hatch set into a curved wall.
Anna stared until her eyes watered in the dry air.
"This is an access point," Ben murmured, voice hushed, as if volume could wake something. Gabe looked at Anna. "We turn back?" he asked. It wasn't a command. It was a test of leadership.
Anna felt her mouth go dry.
Turning back would have been the sane choice. Turning back would have been the ethical choice, maybe. Document what they'd found, leave the deeper layers sealed, return with experts and protocols and contingencies. But the ship, if it was a ship, was behind that story. The airlock, the hull, the ribs. A buried machine beneath a pyramid. No one funded expeditions for sanity. And Anna, if she was honest with herself, hadn't spent a decade assembling shards of myth into coordinates to stop at the edge. She could feel the weight of that honesty settling into her ribs. "We go," she said. Gabe's eyes narrowed. Then he nodded once. "Then we do it carefully," he said. "No rushing. No touching what you don't have to touch." Marco's exhale sounded like relief. "Finally," he muttered. They went deeper. The corridor beyond the incised chamber narrowed further. It became a throat. Low ceiling, walls pressing close, stone dampening sound so their breathing became the loudest thing in the world. Anna's headlamp beam trembled slightly as she walked. Not from fear, she told herself, from exertion, from adrenaline. The slope ended abruptly in a larger chamber that felt intentional. It wasn't decorative like the upper levels. It was functional. The walls were smoother, the stonework more precise, and in the center of the chamber stood a door. Not a gap, not a recess. A door. It was framed in heavy stone blocks that had been fitted with such obsessive care that the seams looked like scars. The door itself was a slab carved with the Starman motif, descending, haloed, hands outstretched. Beneath him, the mound. Beneath the mound, the mouth. The artistry was exquisite. The kind of work a culture did when they wanted something to be permanent. Anna stepped closer, heart hammering. She felt the pull of it like gravity. "This is the foundation door," she whispered. Ben's headlamp beam swept across the slab. No soot, he noted. No smoke staining. They didn't use torches here much. Or they didn't stay long, Priya said. Gabe moved to the edges, examining the frame. He ran his gloved fingers along the seam where stone met stone. His posture shifted, becoming more cautious, more alert. "This isn't just a door," he said. Anna looked up. "What do you mean?" Gabe pointed his light at the seam. "See that?" he said. Anna leaned in. The seam wasn't sealed with mortar. It was sealed with something else. A thin, dark layer that had hardened, clinging to the stone like resin. Not the wet, soft resins you found in the forest. This was old and cured and unnatural in its uniformity. It looked like it had been applied deliberately, in a continuous bead. "Someone wanted this airtight," Priya murmured. Ben swallowed. "Airtight in a pyramid." Marco shifted impatiently. "It's a tomb," he said.
as if the word could make everything reasonable.
Anna didn't answer.
She was staring at the bead of dark sealant, and her mind was replaying the carved hatch in the incised murals. A hatch with a thick border, an airlock. She could feel it, suddenly, like certainty. Behind this stone door was not another ceremonial chamber. Behind it was something that wasn't stone at all.
Gabe looked at Ben.
"Tools," he said. Ben hesitated. "You want to open it?"
Gabe's eyes flicked to Anna.
"She does," he said. "And we're here, so we do it right." Anna felt a flash of gratitude and resentment at the same time. Gabe was protecting them from their own momentum, but he was still letting momentum happen. Ben pulled out a pry bar and a small mallet. He didn't swing hard. He didn't need to. He tapped at the seam, listening.
Stone answered with solid dullness.
Sealant answered with a faint, brittle crackle. They worked around the edge slowly, prying, tapping, easing. The door didn't budge at first. Then, with a soft groan that traveled through the chamber like a sigh, it shifted a fraction. Anna held her breath. Cold air touched her face through the respirator filter. Faint, dry, metallic. Not the breath of stone. The door moved again, grinding against its frame. Ben braced his shoulder and pushed. The slab swung inward, and the world behind it made no sense. For a heartbeat, Anna's brain tried to interpret it as more stone, because that was the only category it had for what lay under pyramids. Then her headlamp beam slid across a curved surface that reflected light differently than masonry. Smooth, dark, manufactured.
Metal.
A wall that wasn't straight but arced away like the inside of a drum.
And set into that curved wall, centered behind the ceremonial stone doorway, as if the pyramid had been built to guard it, was a real airlock, not a symbol of one. Not a stylized mouth. An airlock faceplate with locking dogs, a manual wheel, a gasket seam, and a small viewport that had clouded with mineral deposits over centuries.
Anna stood frozen.
She felt the chamber behind her fill with the sound of everyone's breathing. Kellen whispered, "Holy!" Gabe cut him off softly. "Don't," he said. "Not out of superstition, out of reverence for silence." Marco let out a low laugh that sounded almost like fear. "So," he said, voice shaking with excitement, "your star man was real."
Anna couldn't find words. She stepped closer, drawn toward the airlock the way a moth is drawn toward a flame it doesn't understand.
The airlock metal was scarred, not by time, by heat. The surface around the gasket seam showed faint discoloration, like something had been cooked here once. Anna's stomach tightened. Someone had tried to seal this with more than stone. Priya raised her sensor wand. It beeped again, insistent. "Air composition is off," she said, eyes narrowing behind her mask. "Lower humidity, higher... I'm getting traces of something else." "Like what?" Ben asked, voice tight.
Priya hesitated.
"Like nothing," she said finally. "Like air that's been scrubbed, filtered. This doesn't smell like tomb air."
Anna stared at the manual wheel.
It was dusty, crusted with mineral flakes, but intact. Manufactured metals that didn't oxidize easily. Built to endure, built to seal. Gabe's voice was calm, but Anna could hear tension under it. "We don't rush this," he said. "We document. We take readings. We decide." Marco stepped closer, impatience flashing. "Decide what?" he demanded. "We open it. That's what we came for."
We came for a pyramid,
Anna said, voice hoarse.
"And you found the ship under it," Marco shot back. "That's better."
Anna's eyes flicked to Gabe. Gabe's expression was unreadable. 5 minutes, Gabe said finally. "We record everything, then we decide. Together." Anna nodded and forced herself into procedure because procedure was the only thing standing between her and raw awe. They photographed the airlock face from every angle. Kellen filmed the stone doorframe, the way the pyramid's carved slab aligned almost perfectly with the airlock center. Priya took air samples from the chamber, watching her meters like they were a heartbeat monitor. Ben ran his hand along the airlock edge carefully, gloves squeaking faintly on metal. This is not anything local," he murmured. "No," Anna said. "It's not." Marco's patience snapped. "Open it," he said. Gabe looked at Anna. If we open it, he said, we might change whatever's been stable down there for 1,000 years.
Anna swallowed. If there's still air sealed behind it, she said. If there's still...
She didn't finish the sentence. She didn't want to say whatever the murals were about. Priya's voice was quiet. The deeper murals show something spreading, she said. Not a war, not a flood. A kind of consumption.
Marco scoffed. They were primitives painting plague, he said. This is science now.
Anna felt anger flare. They weren't primitives, she snapped. And the fact that they built this around an airlock means they weren't ignorant either.
Marco's smile was sharp.
Or they were impressed by shiny metal, he said.
Gabe held up a hand. Enough, he said.
Silence returned, tense and breathing. Anna stared at the airlock wheel. Her mind kept replaying the incised mural, the hatch on the curved wall, the starman bracing, the ceiling panels, the forest returning. If they opened this, they were stepping into that story. But the story was already open. The stone door had been moved, the air had shifted. The chamber that had been sealed for centuries had breathed again.
Open it, Anna said softly.
Gabe studied her for a long moment. Then he nodded once, as if accepting something he didn't like but couldn't avoid.
Ben, he said, you do it, slow.
Everyone stays back, masks on. Nobody sticks a hand in.
Ben swallowed, then stepped forward.
He planted his boots on stone, took the manual wheel with both gloved hands, and pulled.
The wheel didn't move at first. Mineral crust held it in place like a fossil.
Ben grunted and shifted his grip. Gabe stepped forward and placed a hand lightly on Ben's shoulder. Steady, he said. Ben exhaled slowly, then applied pressure again, more controlled. The wheel turned. A faint groan came from inside the airlock as mechanical seals that hadn't moved in centuries began to yield. Dust fell in a thin stream from the top seam. Ben turned again, and the locking dog shifted with a soft clunk. Anna's heart hammered so hard she could hear it in her ears. Ben pulled the door outward. It resisted, held by gasket suction and time, then released with a soft pop that sounded obscene in the chamber's quiet. The airlock door cracked open.
A breath came out, cold, dry, sterile.
It carried a faint chemical tang that didn't belong in stone or forest. Something like old plastic, old metal, scrubbed air that had been cleaned too thoroughly. Priya's sensor wand beeped in alarm. Her eyes widened. "Oxygen is low," she said. "Not dangerous here yet, but—" Gabe stepped closer, careful. "We don't go in far," he said. "We keep the door open, we monitor. If anyone feels dizzy, we back out." Marco's excitement practically vibrated.
"This is it," he whispered.
Anna moved forward, headlamp beams sliding into the airlock interior. The space beyond was small and curved, a short chamber lined in dark metal. The floor was ribbed, the walls were smooth and cold-looking. Dust lay in a thin film, but it was different from stone dust, finer, almost like ash. At the far end of the airlock was another door, a bulkhead. Its surface was smeared at the edges with something dark and hardened.
Sealant, hand-applied, messy in places, ridged with fingerprints frozen in cured resin.
Anna's skin prickled. Someone had sealed from inside.
"Look!"
Kellen whispered, filming the smear.
Anna stepped into the airlock.
The cold hit her through her clothes. Not just temperature, atmosphere. The air felt thin, not in oxygen, but in moisture. Her skin tightened. Her lips felt drier instantly. She turned her headlamp on the bulkhead seam. The sealant bead wasn't uniform. It was thick in places, thin in others, like it had been applied in a hurry. And there, embedded in the sealant near the manual latch cover, was a single hair-thin sliver of something pale. Anna leaned closer. Bone?
No, too small, too smooth.
It could have been mineral, or it could have been something else, caught and entombed when the sealant was smeared.
Gabe entered the airlock behind her, stopping just inside the doorway. "We don't break that seal today," he said.
Marco appeared in the airlock doorway, craning.
"Why not?" he demanded. "We're here. That's the ship."
Gabe's eyes flicked to him. "Because someone sealed it," he said. "And because the murals below don't show a treasure."
Marco's mouth tightened.
"You're letting superstition slow you down," he said.
Anna's voice was low.
"I'm letting evidence slow me down."
Marco turned toward her. Evidence is the ship, he said. Evidence is technology under a pyramid. Whatever's in there is what matters.
Anna stared at the sealant. The hardened smears were evidence too. Panic preserved in polymer. Gabe exhaled slowly. We take samples from here, he said. We document the seal. We leave. We come back with a plan.
Marco's expression sharpened. A plan for what? He asked. To look at it from outside, forever?
Ben stood just behind them, breathing hard in his mask. We can't unopen what we opened, he said quietly.
Anna looked back at the airlock door behind them, the one they'd cracked. It hung open into the stone chamber, a mouth now breathing dry air into a place that had been stable. Ben was right. The boundary had been crossed.
Priya stepped into the airlock carefully, sensor wand held like a talisman. I want a swab, she said, from the sealant and from the dust. Something's odd.
Odd how? Kellen asked.
Priya's eyes flicked to the wand display.
This air is too processed, she said. It's not just old. It's been scrubbed, like a sealed system designed to maintain itself.
Marco scoffed.
It's a ship, he said. Of course it's scrubbed. Priya's gaze was steady. It's scrubbed after 1,000 years, she said. That's not of course. That's intentional. That's design. Or, she paused, choosing her words, it's still doing something. The last words landed like a stone dropped into water.
Anna felt a cold line run down her spine. Gabe's voice became firm. We are not opening the inner bulkhead today, he said. We take minimal samples and we leave. Marco's hands curled into fists. You can't, Gabe cut him off. I can, he said, because I'm the one who gets your body out if something goes wrong. You want to open it? Fine. Later, when we're not doing it blind. Marco's jaw worked. Then he exhaled sharply through his mask, defeated for the moment. Fine, he said. Samples. Priya moved to the sealant with a swab. She didn't touch it with bare glove. She used forceps to lift the edge of a hardened smear and take a tiny shaving. She sealed it in a vial and labeled it with a steadiness Anna envied. Ben scraped a pinch of the fine dust from the airlock floor into another vial. The dust felt like ash between glove fingers. Kellen filmed everything, camera whirring softly. Anna stood in the center of the airlock and listened to her own breath. The air tasted faintly sour beneath the sterile tang. Something organic, old. She didn't like that she could smell it through the filter. Back out, Gabe said. They turned to leave, and that's when Anna saw it. At the base of the inner bulkhead, where the sealant bead met the floor seam, something glistened faintly in her headlamp beam. Not water. This air was too dry for water beads. It was a tiny, thick sheen, opaque, pinkish-gray, like rendered fat cooled on metal. It clung to the seam as if it belonged there. Anna stared, and for a heartbeat she thought she'd imagined it, an artifact of light and dust. Then the sheen tightened, subtly, as if it had muscles under it. Anna's mouth went dry. Priya, she whispered. Priya froze. What? Anna pointed with 2 fingers, careful not to move too fast. There, she said. Priya leaned in, headlamp beam joining Anna's. The sheen became clearer under doubled light. A small, coagulated knot pressed into the seam. It wasn't liquid. It was cohesive. And threaded through its surface, barely visible, was a pale filament that looked like bone. Not a whole bone. A sliver, pitted, softened at one end. Ben exhaled sharply. What the hell is that? Marco stepped forward before Gabe could stop him. Is that biological? Gabe grabbed Marco's shoulder and hauled him back with a force that made Marco stumble. Don't touch it, Gabe snapped. Anna's heart hammered. It's inside the sealant seam, she said, voice thin. Priya raised her sensor wand closer. It beeped, then beeped again, the tone shifting into something more urgent. CO2 microspike, Priya said, and her voice went very quiet. Right there. Ben swallowed. From what? Priya didn't answer immediately. She stared at the knot, as if her eyes could turn it into a non-problem through sheer refusal. Then she said, metabolic activity. Tiny, but yes. Anna felt her stomach drop. Marco's voice shook with excitement that sounded too much like greed. It's alive, he whispered. Gabe's face was hard. "We're leaving," he said.
Marco protested.
"No, this is the whole point." Gabe's grip tightened. "This is the point where you stop," he said. "We've got what we came for. We have a ship. We have documentation. We have proof. We are not opening the inner bulkhead to whatever that is."
Anna stared at the knot one last time. It didn't move dramatically. It didn't lunge or reach. It simply sat there, glossy and wrong, as if it had been waiting for moisture and warmth,
As if their presence had made it remember. Gabe backed them out of the airlock like he was retreating from an animal he didn't trust. He kept his body between Marco and the seam. They stepped into the stone chamber, and the warmth of the pyramid hit Anna like a wave compared to the ship's cold air. Ben reached for the airlock door to close it. His gloved hands hesitated on the wheel.
"You want it shut?" he asked Gabe.
Gabe stared at the opening. "Yes," he said. "We restore the boundary as much as we can." Ben began turning the wheel, slow and controlled. The locking dogs shifted. The gasket seam kissed shut with a soft, rubbery sound. And then, for the first time since they'd opened it, Anna heard the ship make a sound.
Not a voice, not an alarm.
A faint internal click, like a relay engaging in the dark.
Her skin prickled.
Priya's eyes snapped to her sensor wand. "Pressure change," she whispered. "Very slight." Ben frowned. "From closing it?"
"From something responding,"
Priya said.
Gabe's voice was tight.
"Move," he ordered.
They didn't argue.
They sealed the ceremonial stone door back into place as best they could, wedging it with chocks and packing loose stone into the gap. It wasn't airtight. It would never be airtight again, not the way it had been.
But it was something.
They climbed back up through the throat corridors, headlamps bouncing, breathing loud in masks. The upper murals greeted them again with their clean joy, and Anna felt almost sick looking at them now. The myth had been a kindness. The truth was below, pressed into stone and metal, waiting for hands like hers to unseal it again. When they emerged into daylight, the heat and smoke hit them like a wall. The haze was thicker now. Sunlight through the canopy looked bruised. Somewhere far away something was burning, and it felt closer not in distance, but in inevitability. They returned to camp with the samples like stolen teeth. Anna sat under her tarp, hands shaking slightly as she reviewed Kellen's footage. The airlock on screen looked impossible. Metal and seals behind stone carved with gods. The smear of hand-applied sealant around the inner bulkhead looked even worse in high resolution. Human panic preserved.
And the knot in the seam. On the video it glistened and sat there, a tiny weight of flesh and bone threaded into a crack.
Priya laid out her vials like a surgeon preparing for bad news. Ben hovered, restless. "We going back down?" he asked, unable to help himself. Gabe's eyes were fixed on the pyramid, on the terraces half swallowed by green. "Not today," he said. "We think, we plan. We don't let curiosity get someone killed."
Marco paced.
"You're overreacting," he said. "It was a clot, a piece of something. It's not a demon."
"No one said demon,"
Anna replied sharply. Marco stopped and looked at her. "Then what are you saying?" he demanded. Anna stared at the pyramid's stone faces, at vines hanging slack in the drought air. She thought of the deep murals. Sickness, collapse, a black tide consuming shapes until they were outlines. She thought of the starman bracing the hatch. She thought of the ship's dry breath. "I'm saying the story doesn't end with arrival," Anna said quietly. "It ends with sealing. And we just opened the seal." Priya's voice cut in, calm as a scalpel. "The sample from the sealant bead contains organic polymers," she said, glancing at her portable analyzer. "Not tree resin, not animal glue. Synthetic. And," she paused, frowning, "there are biological components in it. Proteins. Degraded, but present." Ben's face went pale. "From what?" Priya looked at him. "From something that was pressed into it," she said. "Something living. Or once living." Marco scoffed. "So there was a dead rat in the seam," he said. "Congratulations." Priya's eyes didn't leave her readout. "Not rat," she said. Anna leaned forward. "What then?" Priya hesitated. Not because she didn't know. because she didn't want to commit to the shape of it yet.
"There's calcium," Priya said finally, "and collagen, bone signatures, but the ratios are wrong. Like the material was processed." Ben swallowed hard. "Processed how?"
Priya didn't answer immediately. She set the vial down and rubbed her gloved fingers together, as if trying to scrub away what she'd touched.
"Like digestion," she said quietly.
Silence fell over the top. Even Marco stopped moving. Outside, the generator hummed. Smoke haze drifted between trees. The jungle's chorus was thin and uncertain. Gabe's voice was the only thing that sounded normal. "We are not opening that inner bulkhead," he said. "We document, we extract, we leave."
Marco's head snapped up. "Leave?" he repeated, incredulous. "With a ship under a pyramid? With—" He gestured at Priya's vials. "With proof of biological whatever? You think anyone will believe you if you walk away now?"
Anna felt heat flare in her chest. "Belief isn't the point," she said. "Safety is."
Marco's smile was sharp.
"Safety doesn't get published," he said. "Safety doesn't get paid."
Gabe stepped forward, and for a moment Anna saw the other life Gabe had lived. Places where men like Marco had pushed too far, and people had died because of it. Gabe's voice was quiet. "You're not in charge here," he said. "Not today." Marco held his gaze. For a long moment, neither blinked.
Then Marco looked away, jaw tight. "Fine," he said. "But you're not burying this."
Anna almost laughed at the irony. It was already buried. That was the problem. As the afternoon wore on, the heat rose and the smoke thickened. The generator's hum seemed louder against the muted forest. Anna found herself watching the pyramid's terraces, imagining the layers beneath. Clean myth above, grim record below, and beneath that, a ship sealed behind stone. She imagined the tiny knot in the seam, glossy and alive in a way it shouldn't be, and she couldn't shake the feeling that somewhere behind that airlock, something had been waiting 1,000 years for warmth and moisture to return. In the evening, as the light tilted toward red through smoke haze, Gabe ordered a perimeter check. Not for the creature, none of them wanted to say that word yet, but for fire, for falling trees, for roots out if the distant burns became close ones. Ben and Kellen went with him, machetes cutting through brittle undergrowth. Priya stayed under the tarp with her vials and instruments. Marco sat in his hammock and stared at the pyramid like it owed him something. Anna stood alone at the camp edge and watched the canopy. Ash drifted slowly, almost gently, like black snow. Her mind went back to the deepest incised panel, the one that had shown the mound surrounded by curling shapes that could have been smoke. At the time, she'd thought of ceremony, of ritual. Now she wondered if it had been something else entirely. She wondered if the builders had learned the hard way that sealing wasn't always enough. Behind her, Priya's voice called softly. "Anna!" Anna turned. Priya held up one of the vials, the dust sample from the airlock floor. Under the tarp light, it looked like fine ash, grey and pale. "I ran a basic assay," Priya said. "It's not just mineral. There's organic residue in it." Anna's throat tightened. "From what?" Priya's eyes were steady, but Anna could see the unease beneath her calm. "From decomposed biological material," she said. "Proteins broken down, lipids, trace calcium, like something has been processed into particulate." Anna felt her stomach drop. "Like the airlock has been cleaned," she whispered. Priya nodded once. "Yes," she said. "Over a long time, slowly. Something in there has been metabolizing whatever organic material existed inside that sealed system." Anna's voice came out thin. 1,000 years. Priya didn't correct her. She didn't need to. The implication hung between them like smoke. Gabe returned at dusk, face streaked with sweat and ash dust. "Fire's not here," he said, "but the haze is worse. Winds from the east." Ben looked exhausted. "We should pull out," he muttered. "We've got proof. We've got the scans. We're not going to get stuck in a wildfire." Marco's voice snapped from his hammock. "You're not leaving," he said. It wasn't a request. It was a demand. Gabe turned slowly toward him.
"Watch me," he said.
Marco sat up, his face half-shadowed by smoke-dim light. "You leave now, you lose the chance to open that ship," he said. "You lose the only thing that makes this more than a paper and some photos."
Anna felt a surge of anger and fear braided together. "This isn't about your chance," she said. "It's about what that thing, whatever it is, did to those people."
Marco laughed once, short and bitter. "Those people are dead," he said. 1,000 years dead. Whatever happened to them isn't happening now."
Priya's voice was quiet, but it landed like a weight.
"It started happening now," she said.
Marco stared at her. "Because of a clot in a seam?" he demanded.
"Because of metabolic activity," Priya replied, unflinching. "Because of processed residue. Because something inside a sealed ship under a pyramid is still capable of doing chemistry."
Marco's jaw worked. He looked away.
Gabe's voice cut through. "We sleep," he said. "At first light, we reassess. If the fire risk worsens, we pull out."
Anna lay in her hammock that night with smoke in her throat, and the image of the airlock burned into her mind. She kept thinking about the inner bulkhead, the one sealed with frantic hands, the one they hadn't opened. She wondered what lay behind it.
Not treasure.
Not technology. Something the Starman had tried to keep from the world long enough for stone and time to do what steel couldn't. She closed her eyes and imagined a dense, amorphous mass in the dark. Half-dissolved flesh, bone protruding like rebar, held together by its own cohesion, waiting in cold dryness, dormant but not dead. Then she imagined what would happen when water returned to it, when warmth returned, when oxygen returned. Outside, somewhere beyond the canopy, a distant crackle sounded like thunder but wasn't. Anna lay very still, listening, and realized the jungle wasn't just quiet. It was listening too. And deep under the pyramid, behind stone and metal and a seal that no longer perfectly held, something had been given permission to remember what wetness felt like. Something small for now, a knot in a seam, a glisten that tightened, a drip that cleaned dust away, a process that had never been meant to find a rainforest, and now had. At first light, the smoke was a ceiling. It hung between the treetops and the pale sky in a thin, dirty sheet that turned the sun into a washed-out coin. The air tasted like ash and old paper. Even the birds sounded uncertain, calls cut short, as if the forest had learned to conserve noise. Anna woke with her throat already dry. For a moment she lay in the hammock and listened to the camp. The soft shift of fabric, the muted clink of gear, Gabe's low voice ordering someone to drink water before coffee. The generator was off. Gabe had killed it before dawn to avoid heat and sparks while they slept. The pyramid loomed beyond the tarps as a darker shape in the smoke haze. Vines hung slack. The stones seemed to absorb light rather than reflect it. Anna sat up, swung her legs over the hammock edge, and felt the heat already building beneath the morning cool, like a second day waiting to happen. Priya was under her lab tarp, eyes focused on a readout, face set in that calm she wore when her brain was working faster than her body could admit. Kellen stood nearby with a battery pack in hand, half awake but alert, as if the ship footage had kept him from sleeping properly. Ben sat on a crate rubbing his temples. Marco paced near the pyramid's base, restless as a caged animal. Gabe caught Anna's eye and came over. "Wind's steady," he said. "Smoke's thicker. Fire's still not on us, but it's out there. If it shifts, we move." Anna nodded, then looked past him at the pyramid mouth, at the stone entrance they'd pried open yesterday.
"And the ship?" she asked.
Gabe's jaw tightened. "We do not go back down blind," he said. "Not today. We have proof. We can pull out and come back with—" "With what?" Marco cut in from behind them, voice sharp. He stepped close enough that Anna could smell his sweat through the smoke tang. "With a committee? With a government team that'll lock it down and hand you a polite thank you letter?" Gabe didn't flinch. "With a plan that keeps you alive," he said.
Marco's mouth twisted.
"Alive doesn't matter if we leave empty-handed." Anna felt anger rise, hot and immediate. "We're not leaving empty-handed," she said. "We have scans, photos, samples. We found a ship under a pyramid. That's not empty." Marco's eyes flashed. "It's incomplete," he said. "We didn't open the inner door. We didn't see what the Starman sealed away. You know what this becomes if we leave now? A myth with footnotes, and someone else will come back and open it without you."
Priya looked up from her readout.
"Or no one comes back," she said quietly. "And that's the best outcome."
Marco laughed once, bitter.
"You're afraid of a clot in a seam," he said.
Priya didn't look away. "I'm afraid of a process that can run for 1,000 years on scraps," she replied. "And I'm afraid of how much food it has outside that airlock."
Marco stared at her as if she'd insulted him personally, then turned away, pacing again.
Gabe exhaled slowly and looked at Anna. "We pack," he said. "We reassess routes. If smoke worsens or if the river's too low for return..." A sound cut through his sentence. Not loud, not dramatic. A soft metallic click, like the lid of a case being shut.
Anna's gaze snapped to Marco. Marco stood near the equipment pile where they kept tools and fuel canisters and sealed stoves. Something dark hung from his hand. Ben's pry bar. In his other hand he held a small torch head, the kind used for controlled heating and field repairs, attached to a cylinder Gabe kept locked down unless needed.
Anna felt her stomach drop.
"Marco!" she said sharply.
He didn't look at her. He looked at the pyramid entrance, eyes bright with stubborn hunger.
"You're all going to talk yourselves into leaving," he said. "And you're going to regret it for the rest of your lives."
Gabe stepped forward.
"Put it down!"
Marco shook his head.
"No." Gabe's voice hardened. "That's not a request."
Marco finally turned, and Anna saw something in his eyes that wasn't confidence. It was panic disguised as ambition. He had tasted something bigger than himself and couldn't bear to walk away without biting into it.
"I'm not asking permission," Marco said. "I'm going to open the inner door. I'm going to see what's in there, and then you can decide how scared you want to be."
Ben pushed up from his crate.
"That's insane," he said.
Marco's gaze flicked to him.
"You open the airlock," Marco snapped. "Don't pretend you're pure."
Ben's face tightened.
"We did it carefully." Marco's smile was thin. "There's no careful version of this," he said. "There's only doing it or not doing it."
Priya stepped forward, holding up a gloved hand, as if she could stop him with calm.
"Marco, the air inside that ship is still scrubbed," she said. "Something is still active in there. You don't know what." "I know what it is," Marco cut in, voice rising. "It's the find of the century, and I'm not watching it rot in stone because you're afraid of your own shadow."
Gabe moved like a switch being thrown. He crossed the space in 3 strides and grabbed Marco's arm.
Marco jerked back hard enough that the torch cylinder clanged against a crate.
"Touch me again, and Marco began.
Gabe's voice was low and lethal. "You're going to get someone killed," he said. "Put it down." For a moment it looked like Marco might. His jaw worked, his grip tightening on the pry bar. Then he yanked his arm free and stepped backward toward the pyramid entrance.
"I'm doing it," he said. And the words weren't bravado anymore. They were surrender to something in his own head. "If you want to stop me, stop me."
Anna felt her body move before thought. She stepped forward. "Marco." Gabe grabbed her wrist, not to restrain her, but to anchor her. "Let him go," Gabe said quietly. "If we wrestle him, someone gets hurt. We follow. We keep him from doing something worse."
Priya's eyes widened. "Follow him into the ship."
Gabe's gaze didn't soften. "We don't let him open it alone," he said.
Anna swallowed, tasting smoke.
Marco turned and disappeared into the pyramid mouth.
Kellen swore under his breath and grabbed his camera pack, because even now, even with dread crawling under his skin, he was still a witness at heart.
Ben snatched up the rope line.
Priya grabbed her sensor wand and a sealed vial kit, as if data could keep them safe.
Anna pulled her respirator on with shaking hands. Gabe's eyes met hers over the mask.
"This is not curiosity now," he said. "This is containment." Anna nodded.
They went in.
The pyramid's interior felt tighter than yesterday, as if the stone had shifted overnight. Headlamps threw cones of white across murals that had already changed meaning in Anna's mind. In the upper chamber, the Starman still descended in clean pigment, still welcomed by smiling figures. The mural's optimism felt obscene now, like a lie painted over a grave. They moved faster than they had any right to in an archaeological site. Boots scuffing dust, shoulders brushing stone. Anna hated every hurried step, but she hated the alternative more. Marco alone at the airlock, hands on that inner seal.
They reached the deeper chambers, where the story turned grim. The carved figures with hands to mouths seemed to watch them pass, frozen in their 1,000-year collapse.
Anna couldn't help thinking, this is where you're walking.
This is the story you're choosing to step into. The throat corridor narrowed. The air grew colder, drier. The smell of metal returned, faint but undeniable, like blood on a coin.
Then the foundation chamber opened around them, and the ceremonial stone door stood where they'd left it, wedged and packed with stone.
And it was already open.
The slab hung slightly ajar, pushed inward.
Cold, scrubbed air spilled out like a held breath released.
Marco's headlamp beam flickered inside the gap. Gabe swore softly and shouldered through first, careful but quick. Anna followed, and the air hit her even through the respirator. A dry, chemical tang that made her tongue feel smaller in her mouth.
The airlock door was open. Marco stood inside it, back turned, both hands on the inner bulkhead latch cover. The sealant bead they'd left intact yesterday had been cut away in chunks, pried and scraped. Dark, cured resin lay on the airlock floor like broken scabs.
"Marco," Gabe said, voice sharp.
Marco didn't turn. "There," he said, almost reverent. "Do you see it? It's sealed like a vault, like a—"
"Step away," Gabe ordered.
Marco laughed breathlessly. "You wanted a plan? This is the plan. We open it, we see, then we decide." Anna's headlamp beam slid across the inner bulkhead seam.
The tiny glossy knot in the floor seam, the one Priya had seen, was no longer tiny.
It had spread along the seam like a thickening bruise, opaque and pale and wet-looking, pressed into the crack as if it were being fed from the other side. And threaded through it were pale shapes, bone slivers softened and pitted at the ends. Anna's stomach lurched.
Priya's sensor wand began to beep in rapid pulses.
Gabe stepped forward, posture lowered, as if approaching a wild animal.
"Marco,"
Anna said, her voice barely audible through the mask.
"Don't."
Marco finally turned. His eyes were bright with triumph and fear. "It's just a door," he said. "It's just—" He pulled the latch.
The inner bulkhead didn't swing open politely.
It broke its seal with a soft, wet sound, like skin peeling from a wound. A heavier breath came out. Not just cold, not just dry. Something sweet and ironed and rotten filtered through sterile plastic. The smell of meat left too long in a sealed bag. Anna gagged inside her respirator.
Priya made a strangled sound and stepped back.
Marco's headlamp beam fell into the darkness beyond the bulkhead and illuminated a surface that wasn't metal. A mass.
Not a creature with limbs, not a beast.
An amorphous mound pressed against the door from the inside, as if it had been waiting behind it, using it as a wall.
Thanks for watching Echo Forge. If this story resonated with you, leave a comment, hit like, and subscribe so the next tale finds you. Share this with someone who loves dark fantasy or twisted sci-fi, and I'll see you in the next world.